In this program we interview Birke Baehr. Now Burke is an internationally recognised speaker and advocate for sustainable food and agriculture. After visiting various farms both at home and abroad, he published his first book in 2012 called Burke on the Farm. And he spent the last 5 years travelling around the States and abroad learning from farmers who steward those farms. Burke has a passion for educating others, especially his peers, about the destructiveness of the industrialised food system and telling about the better alternatives of sustainable and organic farming food and practices. When he's not helping to educate others, Burke enjoys getting his hands dirty on chemical-free farms, growing his own vegetables, and so much more. So let's join Alan and this young activist Burke and find out more about how the next generation can be the one that gives us healthy food.
Hello Burke, and welcome to the Low Carb Paleo Show.
Well, thank you. It's an honor being here.
Yeah, it's good to have you.
Yeah.
Hello Mark, how are you? How's everybody today?
Wonderful, wonderful.
I'm doing good. It's a good morning here.
Good, good. So Burke, you and I have known each other for a while on LinkedIn, but this is first time that I have a chance to speak with you in person, and it's a pleasure to meet you. Really, considering the kind of work you do, I'm very impressed. You became known for your 2010 TED talk, What's Wrong with Our Food System? First off, can you give us a little background about yourself?
Well, I originally started researching the food system and what we eat at about the age of 8 years old when I came across an article on the internet talking about how mercury was found in high fructose corn syrup. And at that age, I knew what mercury was from all my friends in third grade telling me, oh, don't eat, don't break a thermometer in your mouth, it has mercury in it, it'll kill you and it's poisonous, but I had no clue what high fructose corn syrup was. So my first thing was, oh, Mom probably knows. Mom knows everything. I just got to ask her and she'll tell me. And so I asked, she was sitting there and I asked her, what is this high fructose corn syrup stuff? And she thought for a second and kind of like said to me, she's like, the only thing I can think it's in is the sweetener they use in sodas. And that was really the first moment right there where I made the connection that why is there something that can kill us in the food that, if we don't eat every day, at least eat once a week. And it
Right.
really started me researching and wanting to find out why there was something that can kill us in our food. And I even came across a study by the University of Calgary where they had a petri dish of brain cells. And they put a very minuscule amount of mercury in the petri dish. And not only did the brain cells just stop growing, but they started retracting and getting smaller. Which that was the moment where I said, well, it doesn't take that much to hurt you.
No.
And it could definitely be a reason for why there's such a breakout of Alzheimer's and dementia in the world now.
Yeah, I've learned something new. I didn't know there was mercury in corn syrup.
Yes, it has to do when they spin it in a centrifuge, and mercury comes off of the heavy metals that's used in the machinery.
Then you became very intrigued about all of this, and then you started to put two and two together and started to be interested in the food and farming aspect of it.
Yeah, it was what happened was as I started learning about the mercury and really researched that, I would read articles on the internet that would start referencing things to GMOs, pesticides and herbicides and chemical fertilizers. And so I would just I would see something that would cause interest. And so I would click on that and start researching that, and it just kept leading me deeper and deeper down the rabbit hole, learning about all sorts of things. And eventually I started learning about the entire food system and not just the high fructose corn syrup aspect of it.
So
It was really shocking to me because at that age you still had this, childlike fantasies of all the cartoon characters that would sell you the, cereals and, the Happy Meals on TV. And growing up from, 2 and 3 years old, remembering these characters, I thought, I thought I trusted these, these characters. And then to find out that what they were selling me was hurting me and possibly killing me was really a shock. And I felt almost betrayed by these companies. And I really wanted to let people know what was happening to our food. And at least, my personal thought about it is, if you know what's in your food and you don't care what you're eating, then that's fine. But you at least have the right to know what's in your food and be able to do the research. Because if you tell somebody what GMOs are and what they can do to you, I'll tell you, probably 90% of the people will decide to just quit eating them if they had the choice.
I agree with you. And then again, my experience, for example, in my work, my job was to try to eliminate GMOs in the company I was working for. And I received a lot of resistance from, not only from the suppliers, because they don't want you to ask those questions, but I got resistance from my employer and from my coworkers. It's like, why are you wasting your time on this stuff? Who cares? So yeah. I'm glad you're on the ball, and I'm glad Rachel is on the ball, and I'm trying to do my bit, and hopefully between Jeffrey Smith and all of us, we'll convince people that actually what they eat is dangerous.
Yeah, I think that's what a lot of people really don't recognize is most of my friends and family that I know, they'll go to the store and the only thing that they really read is the price and see if it's on sale. And that's what people really need to realize is what's in your food, number one, and then try to research and see if it is actually healthy for you or not. And that's the biggest thing is research, because I had, a good 3 years of research before I did my TED Talk, and I found out about all these things that really, really led me to want to speak out about it.
Yeah, and your talk is impressive. And so you wrote your own talk, right?
Yes, I wrote it down and I memorized it because, believe it or not, that was my first public speech I ever presented and gave. And at that time, I was really nervous about it, but I wanted to have my facts correct and everything straight so that I could get the information across that I really wanted people to know about.
Mm-hmm.
Now, believe me, I tried public speaking, and you did a lot better job than I did when I did my version of it. I couldn't even remember all that information you gave out. So, thank you for that. Thank you for that.
Thank you. Yeah.
The thing is, we all need a certain amount of curiosity to stay up to date and all of that. And I'm feeling that in general, it seems like people go about their regular life and they're not very curious about the consequence of the quality of the food on their health. And that's an issue that you understand.
I think the fact that people aren't really willing to research things and be curious about it is definitely a weakness in our society these days. And because it's just like, even if it takes 5 minutes to read an article about what you eat, it's really not that long. In the long term, you could be, saving $500,000, $600,000 in a hospital bill just by reading that article. So
absolutely,
it's more than worth it. You get more than a return on what you could be doing.
Oh yeah.
It boggles the mind that people would not put two and two together. Ever since my first book, I've been advocating spend a little more money on your food/medicine. I use food as medicine, or as a healing medium, right? And you'll spend a lot less and feel a lot less miserable when you're sick and you have to pay all these doctor's bill, hospitals, and surgery, and and possibly some major disease. Wouldn't common sense dictate that you would take care of yourself instead of having to suffer through all of that?
Exactly. That's one of the things that I've always said is, would you rather pay the farmer or would you rather pay the hospital? Because that's what it all comes down to. And I've noticed while I've studied the food system at the same time, the pharmaceutical industry connects with the food system. And, I've noticed that a lot of what they have out there is they don't have any preventative care in the hospital industry. It's nothing to prevent it. It's just to get you better once you get sick.
Mm-hmm.
Whether it's meant to be that way or not, I'm not sure. I'm trying not to be too paranoid about it. But so they, the whole system seems to be designed to make you sick and then wait until you're sick and then try to fix the symptoms once you're sick instead of starting from the beginning and try to stay healthy from the get-go. Of course, that would not be good for business.
Exactly.
I mean, the system they've got now is the one that makes the most profit.
Oh, exactly. I think cancer is a $3 billion industry.
Oh, and the rest, eight.
8? Well, yeah, 8 billion, which is even, which is twice what I just thought it was. And so it just goes to show how much money's behind, healthcare, and also, look at how much money Monsanto and other of these food companies are making.
Yeah.
There's just so much money behind it. It's crazy.
Educate our listeners a little bit from your point of view, from a young farmer's point of view. What is wrong with our food system?
I find the biggest thing that's wrong with our food system has been the disconnect over the past 100 years since the turn of the 20th century, or since the turn of the 19th century, of people no longer knowing their farmer or knowing where their food comes from. That's the largest problem, because I have my grandfather and my great-grandparents. They knew where their food comes from. They even grew a large majority of their food. But nowadays, the only thing that people and kids younger than me think where food comes from is McDonald's or Publix. And so it's hard to, you can definitely figure out how your quality of food can get better if you know the people growing it and producing it. So I think we need to get people connected back to their food. And I also have found that if you get little kids connected to farming and food, they'll eat much better than they do now. They won't mind eating broccoli or carrots, because if they can put that seed in the ground and see it grow up to be this, large plant, and, step by step and have a part in it, they enjoy eating more than they do now.
Right. What I'm saying also is that thanks to you and people like us, there's more and more schools that will teach. They will have their own garden. They will teach kids how to grow their own food. There's programs here and there that would teach people how to grow their own food and cook their own food as well, which is one of the things I do, so that the kids will get an instant connection. They get really their hands dirty, and they get to see the seed grow, and eventually they get to eat it. So they discover the magic of nature, basically.
Yeah, it's an amazing thing, because if you see something like an okra plant which seed is smaller than my pinky nail, and to grow to a plant that's larger than 6, 7, 8 feet tall, I think is just an amazing thing that I love to see. Just watch plants grow over time.
What's your feeling since your TED Talk, which was, 5 years ago?
4 years ago this August.
Right. Have you seen some progression? Have you seen some improvements in our food system?
I definitely have seen a few progression in our food system. I've seen companies, very large companies, start saying that they want to move to healthier foods and start supplying with more organic foods in their grocery stores. I believe Walmart recently released a public statement that said that they want to be, they want to support organic farming more than they have in the past. And I see that as a huge step, seeing these companies start to actually own up to this whole alternative organic food system. But also I see a lot, every time I have been going to a food conference or a farmers conference or a food rally somewhere, I see the crowds growing, and I see the awareness of the movement and what we're eating getting larger throughout the country. So I think that's the biggest change I've seen, is people coming in, showing up at these food events and actually showing that they eat healthier.
Right. And I think really what's happening is that thanks to people like you and others, and, in small version me, we are educating the public. then the public demands, or they start buying what they want, which is cleaner food, organic. And then the big business, when they realize that, they come in on the end. They don't typically, okay, look how long it took Whole Foods to actually finally decide to go GMO free, right? It took them years, and the issue was on the table for a long time. For businesses to start to offer organic, is the only reason is because they see there's a huge profit potential, and so they're jumping on the bandwagon. But really what's driving demand is customers. It's us.
Yes, I think one of the largest things is to see is to find the companies like Coca-Cola and PepsiCo and General Mills, and they own organic producers and organic companies. And I think that we need to figure out how to stop supporting them and start supporting the people that are, you know, family-owned businesses.
Right, right, because they speak on both sides of their mouth. On one hand, they own organic company, but on the other hand, they're trying to fight off the genetically, the labeling,
Yes.
the GMO labeling. So it's like, hello, you know, you can't do both. And only this year, Whole Foods is supporting the GMO labeling efforts in Oregon. Only this year. That they finally come out and say, okay, yeah, well, you know why? Because they finally decided to be GMO free. So now they're putting their weight behind the vote to get labeling done.
Yeah.
I understand you have a book called Burke on the Farm. Can you tell us about your book?
Yes, my book, Burke on the Farm, is about my story about how I got interested in the food system and what I learned about, and it's aimed towards kids to try to get them interested in what they're eating and the food they eat, and try to start that connection at an early age. And I also hope at the same time it can sort of be an inspirational book too for some kids that can show them that, hey, you can go out and you can make a difference too. And, you know, the more kids we can get in our generation to start advocating for healthier eating, the more other kids can relate to them. And we can try to jumpstart this next generation on trying to fix this food system.
Right, right. And this is absolutely the right way to do it. Educate the next generation, because unfortunately our generation is already a little, you know, it actually, no, I shouldn't say that, because it is a fact that the older generation is trying to stay healthy as they get older. So they also drive the market to a certain extent. But the one we need to focus on is definitely teaching children.
I think that's a really an important thing, because I saw what I was able to do, and I think that any other kid that has the passion behind it can achieve it.
So you're educating the next generation of young farmers, right?
I'm trying to.
Yeah, no, good job, good job. I was surprised. Do you sell the book only through your website? Because I couldn't find it on Amazon.
I only sell through my website right now and some independent booksellers and retail shops. That's been my goal so far, is because I have been such a small scale sort of movement that you can get it through my website, but I also try to support the local economies and the local bookstores. So that you know, I'd rather people go shop at the local places than Barnes and Noble and Amazon and that sort of thing. Yeah.
So what I'm excited about is I noticed that you've done a lot of trips with your grandfather to great farms. Can you tell us about it?
Over the years, especially since I did my TED Talk, my granddad has been my companion on a lot of my trips and travels around the states and the world to go to farms and to speak. We've been to farms in California. We went to a farm. One of the very first trips that we went to was the Grassy Valley Sustainable Food and Farm Conference. And we met many farmers there, and we also went to visited a farm called Red Wolf Ranch, which was in that area in Northern California. One of the farms that we visited many times is Classic Organic Farm near Santa Barbara, California, and we've become fairly good friends with the owners of that farm. I believe they recently moved, but they're still great people, and we support what they're doing wherever they go. And then, especially here in the local area of Eastern Tennessee, where I've grown up and lived for the past 15 years, is we know a lot of local farmers here. There's a great local dairy farm called Cruz Dairy Farm, and we're friends with the people who run it, and just we love going to the farmers market every Saturday and know half the people there and get to talk to them and and spread the message.
Right. I hear that your hero is Joe Salatin, that was in Food Inc. Can you tell us about this friendship?
Yeah. Well, I first learned about him from an interview article that was written on Mother Earth News, and really, I was probably about 9-10 years old when I read this, and when I heard about the way that he farms and his just common sense approach to many of the things that he does on his land, was it just had me awestruck by the fact of that I was wondering, why didn't everybody farm like this? Because it makes so much sense. It's so easy, and it helps so many different it helps in so many different ways. And as I kept learning about him, I would listen to interviews, talks he gave. And I just really support the way that he farms and his take on the food system.
Now, you and I are against the use of GM crops in agriculture, me as a chef and you as a farmer. Can you explain your point of view from the farmer's end of business?
I feel like the whole the GM crops and the way that it's affected farmers has not only been bad for the way that Monsanto has caused farmers to sign contracts and make them where they can't save seed and things like that. That has definitely been a huge detriment to the farming here in this country, and suing farmers and then taking their land has just been, I find that it's really been a shock to what the farming here in this country. It's also one of the biggest things that I have against genetically engineered farming is the cross-pollination factor of how farmers that don't even want to grow Monsanto's corn or their seed, and they have neighbors who think it's the best thing in the world, that they're getting sued because they're cross-pollination and they can't even have any legal protection against it. And it's I find it's just a horrible thing that anybody should be allowed to do this without being sued, without the farmers should sue Monsanto for damages to their crops.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, what gets my goat, not to make a joke of it, but is how the government is actually protecting Monsanto for being sued by farmers for their crops messing up with an organic crop. And then in the process, these farmers are losing their livelihood because they can't resell those crops because their clients won't touch it.
Yes, it's unreal to me that the fact that any company is able to get away with something like that.
Well, you know where that comes from, right?
Yeah, money, of course.
Deep pockets.
Yes.
Have you ever looked in the legal side of that?
I've seen the fact of how many people in our country's political system have been formerly on Monsanto's payroll or worked for them, and it's amazing. There's Supreme Court judges, there's Secretary of Agriculture, yeah, of course, anybody that has a connection with Monsanto. There's a lot of people that are in like high level in the agricultural department here that have really like back connections to Monsanto. Michael Taylor, I believe it is. He's the food safety director of the FDA, and he was the former vice president for Monsanto.
Really? You mean there might be a connection?
Really? Just a little bit, yeah.
Just a little bit. Now, my understanding from the get-go is that ever since this started, and I believe this started around Reagan era, the government has always been behind GMOs because they felt there was an advantage they had over maybe a way to extend U.S. domination on the food world, maybe.
Well, at least over the past 20 years, Monsanto has almost has a monopoly over the genetically engineered seed world. There's a few other large companies who produce them, like Dow, DuPont, Syngenta, but there isn't. They really don't compare to the size of Monsanto and all their subsidiaries. So also, I've recently heard that Monsanto has started buying pharmaceutical companies, and they're trying to genetically engineer pharmaceuticals into plants, so that you can eat a hamburger and then get your cholesterol medication at the same time.
Oh boy, oh boy. Okay, and getting back out of that a little bit, another issue for farmers, my understanding is that because the genetically engineered crops are not yielding more, and the overspraying of Roundup and such create actually super weeds and super bugs, the farmers are forced to spray even more, which of course means more money for Monsanto and so on.
Yeah, I actually heard of a government subsidy they were giving out maybe a year or so, maybe 2 years back, where because of this, Monsanto was paying farmers, I believe, $100 to $300 an acre, depending on the case, to spray Agent Orange on their crops, because Roundup is basically just a watered-down version of Agent Orange.
Right.
I actually heard this at a talk that Dr. Vandana Shiva gave, that she told about this, which I thought was, there was already so much that came out after the Vietnam War about how Agent Orange could cause cancer and all these things, and then to the fact that Monsanto decides to try to sell it back to farmers to use on their crops, I just find.
Actually, USDA is in the process of approving this. Was it 2D4, the new more powerful version of the pesticides that contains actually Agent Orange, right?
But as you've said with these super weeds, it's still they're going to start building these resilience to it until there's too much chemicals to be sprayed. So I find that they're eventually gonna hit a dead end and they can't do anything about it.
Right. So the problem is it's a race towards nothing, because you can, as you probably know, you can't beat nature. Nature will always find a way to survive and adapt.
Yes.
So you have a human fighting against nature with chemicals, and guess who pays in the process? We do, because consumers end up eating those foods that are now doused 2 or 3 times as much pesticides as they used to, and it ends up in our body.
Exactly. That's the biggest thing. Is I always wondered why my parents told me to wash off the fruits and vegetables when I was younger. It was because there's all these things that's been being sprayed on our food that we have. That at that time I had no clue what it was, and I was like, okay, I'll wash it off. And there's this thin film of pesticides or buildup on on a tomato, and it's like, oh, what's that on my thumb? It's kind of like shiny, and and then now I find out that it's really not that great for us.
That's true, but then when the toxin is actually built into the crop, like Bt toxins, it doesn't matter how much you wash it; it's still in the food.
Yeah, and then once you eat it, it'll go into your gut and start producing Bt toxin in your gut.
But tell me about your recent trip. I understand you went to Russia recently.
Yes, I went to Russia last October, and that was a really interesting trip for me, because here in the U.S., what I find for our food system is that everything's really black and white. You either have really chemical and industrialized farms, or you have the small-time organic family farmers. And in Russia, what I would find is that it's sort of like in the middle, in gray, of most of the farms, because you'll have almost like an industrial dairy farm, but they grass feed their cattle, and they graze them on grass during the summer, and they make their own hay, while at the same time they do feed corn and things like that. So it was really interesting to see that there's almost like an in-between side to this whole food system that was new to me, that I'd never seen before.
Isn't it true that GMOs are actually banned in Russia?
From what I could find, yes, they were. But they were banned from being grown in Russia. Anything that's a domestic product of Russia there cannot contain GMOs. But something like an import product from the United States or from somewhere else can contain them. But I think I read that last year, after I came back from the trip, that their Ministry of Agriculture was going to try to stop the importation also.
Right. And especially now that we have some kind of a I don't know how you put it, but there's tensions between U.S. and Russia, and there's sanctions, and I'm sure the Russian will say, well, if you put sanctions on us, then we'll stop buying your products.
Oh, of course. I think that could very well be a reason for it. It was really interesting. I think I believe it was last fall that the GMO wheat was found in Oregon.
Yeah.
That that when that happened, I believe China, Japan, Russia, and quite a few countries in the EU stopped imports of American wheat because of it. Because of their laws considered pertaining to GMOs.
Yeah.
Right, which is another way it hurts the farmers, because now they have crops they cannot sell.
Yes.
So there we go again, another way to hurt the farmers. So much for, saving the world and with GMO crops, right?
I was just going to say that all the GMO crops they try to make a good thing out of, like the golden rice. I think you had to eat like 16 cups of golden rice to get enough of the vitamin A that they enough of the daily dose of vitamin A that you need, which is too much rice for anyone to eat, I think. Right.
Besides the poor countries where this crop is targeted to can't afford to buy 16
cups. Well, isn't it such a ridiculous thing that people are trying to make these countries in Africa that are dependent on rice, which rice is a plant that grows in 3 feet of water?
Yeah.
You need to find a plant and teach people in countries like Africa and things like that, or continents in places like Africa, that they need to eat foods that can grow in their climate and in their environment. That's things like okra that can grow good in really hot weather and no water. So there's plants out there that are suited for their environment. You just have to find them and teach the people to grow them.
Right. Don't tell Monsanto I said that, but to have proper amount of vitamin E, why don't they grow carrots?
Yeah, exactly.
Okay. I'm gonna have to do a little mea culpa here from my whole generation. It looks like us adults dropped the ball on this whole issue. How can we fix our mistakes? And it looks like the new generation will be the one fixing our mess, basically.
I find that the number one first way to fix what you do and what you eat is always keep researching and learning, because I wouldn't be where I am without doing all the research that I've done. But research and learn what's happening to the food, and just keep your ear out there, and also start trying to educate your friends and family. People who you know, people who you meet. Starting the conversation with everybody you talk to. That, hey, this is what's going on with our food. You need to look into it and kind of see what you can find out, because the more people that learn about this, the better chance we have of getting something to actually change, and something drastic to change, which is really needed.
Yeah, and that's why we need to educate the younger generation. Now, I assume you have your path already. You know exactly where you're going. Where do you see yourself in a few years?
I see myself over the next few years definitely continue educating people about what's going on in our food system. I hope by the time I'm 18 to at least see what see GMOs labeled or even banned here in the United States, because that's really one of the biggest things that I'm working towards right now. But I'd like to see, I'm definitely just trying to, over the next few years, I plan on continue doing what I'm doing, getting the word out there, and getting people interested in where their food comes from.
Are you getting a particular degree towards that, or it's just mostly talking and...
As of right now, I don't believe I would be going to university for that, but things could change depending on what happens. As of right now, I sort of see it as the next 3 to 5 years, just continue educating the public about what's going on.
Well, you do have a lot of information, to offer to your followers and young farmers and people like us. Can you give us, tell us where they can find that information?
Yes, I have a website, which is birkeonthefarm.com, BIRKE onthefarm.com, and you can also follow me on Twitter and on Facebook, and that would be at Birke Baehr on Twitter and Birke Baehr on Facebook.
Cool.
You've covered it slightly, but do you see yourself staying in farming for the rest of your life, or is there something else that you've got a burning passion to do?
I definitely see myself educating people all throughout my life, at least, and definitely about the food system. But I don't know what's gonna how things are gonna pan out in the farming thing. I would definitely like to see myself in the future have a homestead or a small farm where at least I can grow enough food for my family to eat from. But to make it a profession, I'm trying to sit back and see how. I'm not definitely sure that if that's going to be able to happen yet, but I'd like to try to make it happen.
Excellent.
Because you see, it's definitely kind of not a great thing to see, but it's definitely a problem we have in the United States, is how old the farmers are here, and also the amount of farmers we have. So, it has to be even a smaller minority of farmers we have that grow organic food. So we need people out there that'll produce good food and give it to the public.
Yeah, that's very true. That's very true. So if there's one thing that you would say to people that they have to take notice of, above all else, what would that be in order to bring the situation back to something like normal?
I think that the biggest thing is reestablishing that connection to your food and your farmers. Because if people had that connection, they can know the quality of their food, they can know where it comes from, they can, you can have basically watch over everything that happens in the production of your food. Which with that, you can't, you can make sure that there's no GMOs, there's no pesticides and herbicides, they're not fertilizing it to death with petroleum-based fertilizers. There's just when you have that connection, you can make sure that it's almost the purest food you can get.
It's true, and of course, if people are asking questions of farmers, then the farmers themselves know what people want, and they're more inclined to give it to them.
Exactly.
Yeah, because
and also try to support your local economy, your local farmers, get to know them, visit the farms. Enough with giving our money away to huge corporations that couldn't care less about the local economy. We should encourage people to buy more local and support the local farmers, which are the link between us and our food.
Exactly.
One funny question, it might be a funny question. What does your granddad think of all the stuff you're doing?
He really thinks it's interesting, and he's done a lot of the research himself once I started, pushing him in that direction. And he likes to say that my generation's got to fix what his generation screwed up.
That's honest, yeah.
Yeah, and but yeah, he definitely thinks that there's a lot of stuff that's been wrong and is going wrong in our food system and in the world that he's seen progress over his lifetime. So he's really pushing towards trying to get people to sort of do the same thing that I'm talking about.
Excellent.
I could talk with you for hours, about this whole subject. Well, thank you again, Burke, for being on the Carb Paleo show.
Thank you very much. It was great talking to you both.
Yeah, it's been great, and everything you've said, I think, is going to resonate with a lot of people listening.
So the old farts out there are supporting you.
That's good to know. I thought I was just my granddad for a second.
No, you can high five your granddad for us. He's definitely on the ball with that. So thank you everyone for listening. And as we say in Texas, à votre santé, y'all.
Thanks again.
Yeah, thank you so much. It was wonderful talking to you both.